Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm very pleased to be joined by Carrie Ryan, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Trustpilot today. Welcome, Carrie. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Jack. Good to be here.
Great. And in today's discussion, we've got around 20 minutes to talk, and we're going to talk about a couple of different things. So, first and foremost, some major announcements from Trustpilot, which I'm quite excited to get to. We're also going to do a bit of a deep dive into how you guys are thinking about AI and some of the work that the Trustpilot team are pioneering in this space. I'm particularly excited, as I've already said, to hear about TrustLayer, which Trustpilot announced earlier this year. And its potential really is to bridge the critical trust gap in today's AI landscape. Before we dive into the conversation, however, I'd love to start by getting to know a little bit more about Carrie's journey to date. So, Carrie, could you quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background, if that's okay?
Yeah, happy to, Jack. So thanks for having me. Firstly, it's good to be here, and it was good to be at London Tech Week a few weeks ago. So I'm Carrie. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Trustpilot. I've been with the company about a year. Prior to that, I was in private equity for a few years, and also strategy with McKinsey and then Nike and eBay as well. So always had a kind of a slant on strategy of companies. What does the future look like? Where do they play? But more so recently have been focused on the AI space and how do companies need to adjust to meet the needs of AI.
Great. So, obviously, Trustpilot is a household name, but can you tell me a little bit more about what you actually do from your perspective as Chief Strategy Officer, Carrie?
Yeah, great, Jack. I mean, Trustpilot, as you say, I think we've got about 89% brand awareness in the UK. So it's very much a household name here, which is great. Across Europe, about 75% in the US, much lower at the moment, but growing the fastest. So, increasingly expanding worldwide. But, Trustpilot at its essence is a customer review platform. We're the world's largest independent customer review platform. So we're the place you go where you've had a good experience or you've had a bad experience and you want to share that with the world. With the hope that somebody listens. The great benefit of Trustpilot is that many CEOs wake up and they read Trustpilot in the morning to see what consumers are saying about the business. We often hear them say, I don't get the truth from anybody that works with me on a day-to-day, or it's difficult to get the truth. It's often filtered, or they don't want to tell me the bad news. Whereas consumers will not hold back from telling you exactly how their experience has gone. So, what that means is it's something quite special because it gives everybody a voice. And it's not preferencing one voice over the other. So your grandma, Jack, could write a review about her telco experience, and it would have as much weight as Elon Musk writing a review as well. So it's a very open platform. Anybody can engage. And for businesses, it's a place where they can listen. They can hear from consumers. They can respond to consumers, and they can build trust over time. And we know that trust pays, trust counts. Because if you, for example, have a advertising and you have the Trustpilot logo on there, we know that there's 10 times as much click-through as not having that on the advert. And why is that? It's because consumers want a symbol that's independent, that they can rely on to make that assessment of, can I trust a business or not? Day in, day out, we're faced with so many decisions that we have imperfect information on. And how do you make a choice to go with something that's unknown? Well, third-party independent symbols can give you that confidence to make that choice, make that leap. And we talk a lot at Trustpilot about what is trust. Rachel Botsman has this definition, and she says it's a confident relationship to the unknown. It's a way of being able to hand over control, but still know that it's going to be okay. And so we're very interested in kind of what the evolution of trust looks like, how that's come about from local to distributed over time, and what that looks like for the next era. And that's something that we spend a lot of time on.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. And you've already touched upon like some work that you're doing with machine learning. Just dive a little bit deeper into some of the other ways that you're using AI at Trustpilot. So obviously that's been your first year. Thinking ahead to the next 12 months, what are you most excited about in terms of that AI work that you're doing at Trustpilot?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it slightly before, but maybe I can go a bit deeper, is the way that we're using AI to keep the platform clean, spotting fake reviews through signals. We've got over 100 metadata points on every review, things like IP, timing, duplication, tone. But what we're now doing is building on that kind of history of 17 years of content integrity work to now look outwards at how data can help other systems make better decisions too. And that's what led to TrustLayer that you mentioned at the outset,
Yeah.
which is our new proposition that gives platforms access to the full depth of customer feedback on Trustpilot. And what that means is that we're letting other systems, be it LLMs, procurement tools, CRM, search, investing platforms, use real customer feedback to make smarter decisions. It's about, really for us, how do we embed the human experience directly into the tools that people are using every day?
Okay, fantastic. And I'm sure we'll talk even more about TrustLayer in just a moment, but I want to come back to the point. Maybe it's kind of why you guys thought to set up TrustLayer in the first place, but we've talked a little bit about trust already. So in your opinion, does AI have a trust problem? How concerned are both business leaders and everyday consumers about unreliable AI, if you like?
I mean, yes. And I think consumers are right to be cautious. We know from our own research that over half of consumers don't trust AI to be fair or make unbiased decisions. And even more are worrying about the transparency. Where did this answer come from? Whose voice is behind it? And increasingly, we're moving from this era of assistive AI into autonomous AI, when it's actually making decisions for you. And that's quite a black box. So the need for trust is more important than ever. And the issue isn't really just, does a system work? It's also, who is it working for? If a model is trained on data that doesn't reflect your experience, you're not going to trust the output, no matter how slick it sounds or how effective it works. So as AI is moving into this kind of more autonomous space, those trust gaps are really, really important. And unless we start building systems that are built around trust and grounded in reality, then we're going to see adoption falter.
Okay, so could we dive a little bit deeper into some of the case studies from some of these companies or partners of yours? So you talked about investment, venture capital. I know that partners of yours include Advent International, Felix Capital, and they're already using Trustpilot data for investment strategies. So are you able to share any early results from how TrustLayer has improved their decision-making process at this stage?
Yeah, super, Jack. So, as you say, we've announced Advent International and Felix Capital, which we're very excited about. But there's a number of new announcements in the pipeline that you'll see coming soon as well. But I thought maybe I'll give you a few concrete examples of how they're using this in practice to kind of bring that value to life. So, one of the investors that we're working with was doing a diligence on a retail business. And it all looked fine on paper. Sales were up, margins were expanding, but the reviews showed a decline. And they asked us, what's going on here? What's behind that? And we looked into it and we saw that the product itself was performing very well. The in-store experience was doing great, but it all came down to last mile delivery. And what they were finding out is the customers were saying, the parcel at the last mile was being thrown over the fence into the rain, and they were finding it in a puddle. And when we looked deeper into that, we found out that they were outsourcing their last mile delivery to a logistics company with a trust score of 1.2. And we thought that was very illuminating. So what the result was is that private equity firm baked that into the value creation plan. And they actually drove a change in the provider for the last mile delivery. And they anchored the procurement contract back to trust score as a performance metric. And then the logistics company, in turn, started anchoring their commission plan for every delivery driver to the trust score. And lo and behold, over time, customer experience significantly improved. They were able to measure that and therefore talk to that at the exit. And it was a key driver of value creation. So I really love that example. I think it's very concrete. It shows the interplay between industries, the interplay between business, procurement platforms, and investors. and really how the voice of the customer can shape decision-making across the ecosystem. Another example that I'll give you is another portfolio, another private equity company had an athleisure brand as part of their portfolio. And that athleisure brand had just launched a new line of leggings. And they were looking at the performance of those leggings, and the sales looked strong. But then reviews appeared saying that they were splitting at the back during squats. So customers on Trustpilot were calling this exploding tights, which is, of course, highly embarrassing for the company. That feedback wasn't in the sales data yet, but it was in the reviews. And by looking at Trustpilot and really zooming in on where were those reviews coming from geographically, they traced the issue to a specific factory and were able to pull the batch, fix it fast, and effectively deal with the problem before it started impacting on sales. And that's the power of real-time public feedback. It shows up before anything actually hits your P&L. And it gives something to the investor that they can bring into the boardroom as an outside-in form of challenge. So those were two examples that I thought were particularly interesting about where, areas of underperformance can be found. But I'll give you one third one, which is a venture capital fund that we were working with, who shared a really interesting insight. They said that when they're looking for up-and-coming companies, they often look for a drop in trust score as a positive signal. And I said, oh, that's odd. Why do you think that? And they said, well, because when a smaller company is growing very, very fast, often supply cannot keep pace with demand. And so with a simple adjustment of investment into supply chain, for example, you can help that company to achieve that next level. So they're consciously looking for companies that are growing ahead of their ability to fulfill, and they spot that through Trustpilot so that they can inject capital and effectively drive that next horizon of growth.
We've already talked a lot about investment as kind of a sector and how you work a lot with different investment companies, but can you provide some use cases for some of the other companies that you work with at Trustpilot as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, TrustLayer, which is this new proposition on how do we provide people access to the full plethora of all reviews on the site. It's serving a whole bunch of different sectors, right? So investing is one, and that's the one we've gone early with, just to announce some concrete use cases and partnerships of Advent and Felix. But as said, there's a whole bunch of other sectors where the voice of the customer can be a really powerful input to AI training, to decision making. So some of those are AI and LLMs, for example, when it's doing a search or agentic commerce. So we're working there with companies on how do you fine tune the model using consumer sentiment so it truly understands what, Jack, you're looking for from a telco provider. So it's not kind of a generic question and answer, oh, these are the providers. It says, look, we know based on 300 million reviews that people care in telco about these three key buying factors. They care about these things. So let us use that as the filter to now go and look up reviews. Let us talk to you in a language which, based on all this unstructured consumer voice data, can be represented. Can it sound human? Can sound like it really understands what those consumers want, and can provide that kind of personalized agent in the space of telco, for example. So the first thing we're doing is looking at fine-tuning the models based on all of those voices to provide the most effective tool possible. The second thing we're looking at is pulling then in to those models the latest information about how consumers rate those businesses, what they like, what they don't like, competitive intelligence, market intelligence. And then we're looking at how do we embed a mechanism for new content generation within those environments. So if you're scrolling on a social media platform, you don't just have a symbol of trust show up to give you confidence in buying from a company. You also have the ability to review that company from within your environment. So that's really important for us to have that two-way data flow, because it creates this flywheel for the future of humans as a community coming together to create new content, to share experience with one another, and that forming the basis for AI training. But then the AI models also encouraging new content generation, because without that, the models go down over time because they just don't have fresh data to train on. So those are examples and kind of the LLM search space, commerce,
Yeah.
etc. Increasingly payments. There's a number of payments providers you'll see now getting into agentic commerce as well. So
Yeah.
the landscape is shifting very quickly.
Mhm.
But other areas that are very interesting is merchant vetting. So merchant vetting is where a company, perhaps as part of its onboarding flow, wants to do what would traditionally be called KYC, know your customer, which is some basic vetting on the business that's coming onto the platform. But today, the metrics to assess KYC are quite limited. You can assess if it has a criminal record, you can assess it has credit worthiness issues. But surely the voice of the customer is an important thing to look at when you're vetting a business, because consumers will tell you if something's wrong here, if there's a scam happening, if there's fraud at play. And so one of the most recent use cases is merchant vetting, where we help payment providers, we help commerce platforms, advertising platforms to vet businesses before they bring them on the platform. And increasingly, we're looking at other players for that as well. So risk intelligence platforms, companies that do company investment grade ratings, all of those benefit from merchant vetting and KYC. So that's a second area that we think is very powerful. And then the third area is looking at working with business platforms, so CRM, Salesforce, as we do today, to make it easier for businesses to activate review collection from within their own environment. So every time that you have a customer transaction within your CRM environment, you automate an invite being sent, or every time that a payment is received, you automate an invite being sent. And what's very powerful about that is you can pull different data sets together. So you can start to look at, which customers should I reach out to tomorrow based on their propensity or their interest in what I'm offering, because maybe I see from consumers they've got a problem there and I can help them solve that problem. Or based on trust scores, where is churn propensity highest? Because I know now if a customer leaves a score rating of 3 or below, their propensity to churn is a lot higher. So how do I aggregate and pull in those different data sets?
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Carrie. One thing that I'm really keen to talk to you about is off the back of London Tech Week, which was just over 2 weeks ago. One of the key things that came out of that was everyone just wants to know what's next with AI. Like that is the kind of hot topic wherever you look, not just at London Tech Week, at events and on the TV and everywhere. So I'll be interested to hear what you're hearing from your own consumers about what they'd like to see from AI in the next 12 months and beyond.
Well, firstly, Jack, well done on London Tech Week. I thought it was a great event.
Thank you.
Really well
Appreciate it.
attended. It was great to just meet with everyone as always. I mean, look, I get reminded about this all the time. AI has not started 3 years ago with the advent of ChatGPT, and many of us who are not specialists, who don't spend all our time in the AI space, forget that. So AI has been an ongoing for a really long time. I think we're at this moment in time where it's become democratized, right? Everybody is an AI expert. Everyone sort of has an opinion on AI now, which was not the case before. And I think part of that is just we now have direct access, right? Those who don't code can now already start to either with low code build their own stuff, or even just on ChatGPT start playing around. So it's made everybody interested, everybody pay attention. But I think we're quickly going to move beyond that and what I'm happy about is that previously you had this language barrier, I would say, between those that understood the back end of AI because they spoke the language, they were hands-on, and those who kind of kept it at a distance because it was sort of something they vaguely understood but couldn't quite get their heads around. I hope that what we see is a convergence of those two audiences, that we now have folks who both can see the power of the outcome, but they can also understand the basics of what goes into the back end. And obviously moving to a place where the back end's becoming even more obscure, so therefore that becomes harder. But I would like to see that coming together of communities in the same way that historically finance has had that issue, right? Finance has its own language, which can be impenetrable from the outside or can feel quite isolating or exclusionary. And I would love to see those two groups come together and more kind of collective understanding and collective co-creation. But as part of that process, we're going to very quickly go beyond, what is the latest technology? What can this latest efficacy rating shoot on a new research paper of its coding completion tool, etc., into how do we make the use cases truly meaningful with the human at the center?
Okay.
And that's something which we sometimes lose track of, right? We can build for building's sake, and we sometimes don't think about the use case. And for these new applications to be really powerful, they need to understand, what workflows they are taking over, what matters.
Yeah.
They need to understand what sits behind the data, the context of what they are recommending. And one of my beliefs is that for that to work, we need to see a collaboration between AI model training and knowledge platforms. Because
Right.
where's the data coming from? The early generations of the foundational models were training on all publicly available information on the internet. Well, that's now been used. So where's the new data coming from?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
where's the incentive for people to create new knowledge over time?
Mm.
And that's where we've got a gap at the moment. So the move that I think is starting to take place, which is exciting, is knowledge platforms working with model training to create this flywheel of knowledge renewal. And the
Right.
power of that is that us as humans can come together on community platforms, share our real life experiences, share our thoughts, be creative, come up with new ideas. And that can be a continuous living organism of new information. And that data can then power the AI applications that speeds up the kind of historic learning, if you like. There's someone once said AI is called artificial intelligence. Perhaps it should be called collective intelligence, because it's effectively taking all the knowledge of everyone in humanity for all time, and it's putting that at the use of Jack and Carrie, and that's a wonderful thing. But it's also only looking backwards. So how do we create these communities, these knowledge platforms, to generate new content that can continuously improve those AI models over time, and can also do it in a way that is contextually aware and that is useful, and also transparent, so you understand what it's trained on, so you can trust the outcomes of it. And so the things that we're looking at to do that, and I used to work with Stack Overflow, that we did that same process with how does the data train coding assistants, but also drive new knowledge. At Trustpilot, one of the ways that we're looking at that is, how does Trustpilot voice of the consumer data not just power AI training, but how do we create flywheels to also generate new reviews from within these AI workflows? And I think that's the way that you create this continuous knowledge renewal over time. And that's how you create trust and transparency in how the process is actually working.
Obviously, we've covered a lot of ground today, covered a lot of different topics. Just as we're coming up to the end of this interview now, Carrie, I'd like to ask you, if you were to want the audience to leave with one key message off the back of this interview, what would you want it to be?
Oh, big question. I would say, look, if AI is going to make choices for us, it needs to reflect us.
Okay.
And TrustLayer helps bring real human experience into those decisions, not just guesses, not just extrapolations. And the big question really isn't, can the system do it? It's who's it doing it for, and whose voices shaped that outcome. That's where trust matters most. So I really believe that if AI is going to be successful, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be bedded on trust to drive adoption.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks so much for taking the time today. It sounds like you've got a very exciting AI future ahead at Trustpilot. And thanks to everyone that's tuned in to join us today as well. As a final reminder, if you'd like to find out a little bit more about TrustLayer or any of the other AI initiatives at Trustpilot, TrustLayer is set to officially launch in Q3 of 2025. So now is a great time to get involved. Thanks all, and enjoy the rest of your days.